All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Harakaha Kodash. A double honors unto the apostles and elders of JMS Great Millstone, and a sincere Shalom to Yakim bringing out this word in diligence and in truth. And as you see, this article is from endtimeheadlines.org, and it reads, Russia is ready to supply hypersonic missiles to Venezuela. Right now, we understand this is just another one of the birth pains. Ultimately, we understand that this will, help propel thermonuclear destruction upon Babylon the Great, but this is not the end-all, be-all just yet, right? As the scripture says, that the vision is for an appointed time, that at the end it shall speak and not lie. And ultimately, Yahweh Shai is moving forth these chess pieces in order to create that, what can you call it? That checkmate, right? It says Russia could provide its most advanced hypersonic missiles to Venezuela, right? And we understand in the book of Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, and I'll start here at 4. It says, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth in all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya, with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands as Turkey, and the house of Togomar of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Right? It says, be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Right? And that's for Gog and Magog, man. Right? Which is who? Russia. Right? So Yahweh Shai is allowing these prophecies, as he spoke, to come to pass. And they're doing it in due time. And they say he's going to be a guard or protector unto these small nations. Here you say Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, right? And we understand the modern day Persians as Iran, right? But here you see Venezuela, or Russia supplying Venezuela with those same missiles, man. Right? Because here it is. The U.S. is infiltrated, set up puppet leaders, and infiltrated, killed off their leader, set up puppet leaders in order to control the resources of Venezuela, man. And this is nothing new. This is how Esau gets down. The scripture tells us he covets field by violence, yea, he taketh them by violence, right? He oppress a man, yea, even a man in his heritage. So this is just his MO of what he does, to seize the earth of all its resources, right? And ultimately, they're not only doing this to seize the earth of his resources, but to get, a better foothold militarily, to be able to send forth their missiles to their enemies, right? It says the Kremlin claims the Oceanic missile is impossible to intercept and can carry conventional and nuclear warheads. Alexei Zhurevlov, the deputy chairman of Russia's Parliamentary Defense Committee, warned that Americans may be in for some surprises as he opened the door to a weapons transfer to Venezuela. I see no obstacles to supplying a friendly country with new developments such as the Oceanic, or let's say the well-proven Kalber missiles. The Oceanic missile, translating as hazel tree, is capable of striking any target across the European continent in under an hour if launched from Russia or Belarus, right? Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has insisted that the missiles are so mighty that using several of them in a strike with conventional warheads would be just as catastrophic as a nuclear attack, right? Which we understand, the scripture tells us this. Third woe pass, behold, the second woe pass, it's Revelation 11:14, right? And it reads, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly, right? Woe representing forth what? Wars, destruction, right? So the second world's war is past, the third woe cometh quickly. And we ultimately understand that the scripture tells us in the book of Ezekiel, the 21st chapter, and I'm going to grab the 8th verse, and it reads, again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, Prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord, say, a sword is sharpened, and also furbished. It is sharpened to make a sore slaughter. It is furbished that it may glitter. Should we then make mirth? It contemneth the rod of my son as every tree, and he hath given it to be furbished, that it may be handled. The sword is sharpened, and it is furbished, to give into the hand of the slayer. Right? We understand when we go into the book of Isaiah, the 54th chapter, it speaks about what? Matter of fact, let's grab it. Ooh, Shalak. Let's do this really quick. It's Isaiah 54 and 15. It's like in 16. It says, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire. Right now, smith is your modern day scientist. We understand due to ancient war, war technology, it was literally a blacksmith that took, ore, heated it up until it was burning red, and beat it to fashion it into an instrument of war, man, into a sword or a spear, any combat weapon of sort. Right? It says, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, which the modern day smiths, once again, are scientists. And what are they doing? They're going into the lab and figuring out how they can create a bigger bang, right? Through nuclear fission, through capturing uranium isotopes 235, so forth and so on, to harness the power of those elements in order to burn the elements of today, man. Right? The scriptures say the earth shall burn with fervent heat, right? The elements shall be dissolved, right? So that's ultimately what they're being made to do. It says, blow up the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, and I've created the waster to destroy. Now, waster is the thermonuclear missile. But I want to spoke about this article, but I want to go into a little more in depth, on as far as what's going militarily and nuclearly, right? If that's even a word, nuclearly. But nevertheless, I went to ChatGPT to grab some information. Now, we understand you got to chew the meat, spit out the bones, because just this portion of them telling you how many nuclear warheads are currently in effect is incorrect. No nation is going to tell their enemy exactly how many nukes or how many warheads they have. We understand the scripture says 200,000, man, right? Which is 2 million, right? Warheads. So, question I asked, what's the current state of the nuclear arms race? Because we understand that there is a race, right? And it's always going to be a race to see who can destroy who the fastest. Ultimately, because each country, each nation wants to be the reigning power. It was a quote that stated, in the case of nuclear fallout or nuclear war, the next war will be fought with sticks and stones. Basically saying that this last war is going to wipe out all, right? Which ultimately this last war is going to wipe out the age of Esau and usher into the age or the eon of Jacob. For Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, as the scripture tells us. But it says, here's a detailed overview of the current state of the nuclear arms race, what's happening, what's shifting, and what major risks are on the horizon. It says, here are some of the major facts shaping the nuclear landscape today. Right? It says the vast majority, 90% of these warheads are held by Russia and the U.S., which we understand that. They're the two greatest military powers on the earth, man. And these are going to be the same two nuclear powers that destroy one another. Thus saith the scriptures. Several nuclear arms states are actively modernizing and expanding their arsenals, not just replacing old weapons, but adding new capabilities. The major arms control framework between the U.S. and Russia, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START, or New START, is set to expire on February 5th, 2026, and possibilities for a successor are unclear. And it's beautiful that this date comes out, because we understand the INF, which we're going to touch in a little later throughout this lesson. The INF was a treaty that was held between Iran, was held between the U.S., basically limiting the number of nuclear missiles and or warheads, and on top of that, the amount of uranium that could be mined. It kept it under a certain percentage, right? And through that, new nations weren't allowed to basically beef up their nuclear arsenal due to that cap on that uranium. Right? It says one of the world's leading analysis, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, warns a nuclear arms race is emerging amid the weakening of armed control regimes. Right? It says one country in particular, China, is growing fast, estimated at least 600 warheads and potentially increasing by 100 per year since 2023. Now, the scripture tells us about this in the book of Joel. Right? It's coming from the book of Joel, the 2nd chapter. And I'm going to go into the it's like, yeah. Here we go. Joel 3, Salak. Says 3 and 9. It says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. So here it is. You know, all of the nations are gearing up for what's going to be the last thermonuclear war, the last war upon the earth, and as far as nuclear capabilities. When we go back into the book of Ezekiel 21, right, in 11, and it says, he hath given it to be furbished that it may be handled. The sword is sharpened, and it is furbished to give it into the hand of the slayer. Right, the scripture speaks about the weapon being whetted, which ultimately means being perfected. Right, and Yahweh Shema Shai is making these nations get into the spirit of perfecting this arsenal. Joel 3 and 9, it's like at 3 and 10. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. So these same nations, as it mentioned China here, right? These same nations that were, agriculturally strong, they switched their gears from being an agriculture heavy nation into more so a war-like mentality nation, in which they took a lot of the same funds from agriculture and put it into the military presence, man, which means they beefed up their nuclear military to where the point where their scientists worked overtime, their mining increased, and their weapons, their swords have become whetted, has become sharpened, perfected, right? So beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about thither. Cause thy mighty ones to come down. Let the heathen be awakened and come up to the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, which is the Most High's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And ultimately, that valley of decision that is speaking of is going to be the place in the Middle East, in which, these nations will, fight and ultimately be destroyed, right? So let's go back here. Right, and the scriptures say Armageddon is Hamagadwan, right, which is the valley of troops. So to go back here into that date, February 5th, 2026, we understand we're approaching that date. We're currently in what so-called November, so we're 4 months away. Well, the end of November, December, January, and then February is right around the corner. So less than 4 months away from nuclear arms being increased. It says one of the world's leading analysts, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, warns a nuclear arms race is emerging amid the weakening of arms control. Right? It says major areas of concern, end of major arms control treaties, with New START expiring and other treaties like the INF, there it is, already defunct, right? Because what the INF did, ultimately the U.S. pulled out. Then after the U.S. pulled out, it took some time for Iran to pull out. And once Iran pulled out, the U.S. blamed Iran for breaking the treaties. But this is how Esau gets down, right? It says there's far less legal framework to restrain nuclear competition between the major powers, meaning they're going to do all in their power to win. It says without verification and limits, states may feel freer to expand or change doctrines. More players, more complexity. It's no longer just a U.S.-Russia dynamic, right? And how do we know? The scriptures clearly tell us that, right? It says, and it's back in the book of Joel as well. So like, this is Ezekiel. This is coming from Joel 2. It's like it may be second Edris. Yeah, I think it's second Edris. Yep, it is. Second Edris 16. Oh, Jeremiah, Salakia. It's another in the book of Second Edris speaking that as the bow of a strong archer, basically the arrow is going to go into one end of the world to the other, right? And that's speaking of thermonuclear destruction. This is Jeremiah 50 and 14. It says, "Put yourselves in array against Babylon round about. All ye that bend the bow, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against the Lord." So there it is. When we go back into chat, it tells us more players, more complexity. It's no longer just a U.S.-Russia dynamic. China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and others are increasing their capabilities, which complicates deterrence, arm control, and escalation dynamics. And the scripture tells us in Jeremiah that all ye that bend the bow, all ye that holds the nuclear weapon, shoot at who? Shoot at her. Who is her? Babylon the Great. For through her, all the nations have drunken of her wine, and the nations are mad. Because what? They're drunken. Right? So like 4. It's supposed to be Jeremiah. Jeremiah 50. "Put yourselves in array against Babylon round about. All ye that bend the bow, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against the Lord." And that's why the scripture also tells us in the book of Revelation, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and the Most High have remembered her iniquities. Speaking of that same America being personified as a woman, right? It says, shout against her round about. She hath given her hand, her foundations are fallen, her walls are thrown down. For it is the vengeance of Yahweh. Take vengeance upon her as she has done, do unto her. Right? So go back here. It says technology and delivery system innovations. Modernization isn't just about more warheads. It's about new missile silos, hypersonic delivery systems, new submarine or air-launched weapons. China's ICBM silo expansion is one example. It says, I want to hit this part. The risk of miscalculation and escalation. The weaker control regimes plus more actors plus new tech equals increased risk that a conventional war or crisis escalates into nuclear dimension unintentionally. Many analysts call this the third nuclear age. And it says risk of miscalculation, which is funny because the scriptures say otherwise, right? The scriptures don't, there's not going to be a miscalculation in terms of launch. Hence the book of Joel 2 and 7. They shall run like mighty men, still talking about the nuclear missiles. How do we know? When we go into the 4th verse, it says, the appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, right? Representing power. Still speaking about the nukes, right? Because when we go to verse 3, start there. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth, right? And the fire before them is what? The warhead or the explosion. The flame behind them is exactly that, the propulsion to send the nukes over here. It says the land is as the Garden of Eden before them. They're representing what? An Idon, a paradise, right? A place of refuge, a place of opportunity, right? And behind them, a desolate wilderness, because all that's going to be left here is desert creatures, right? Scriptures speak about the torment of her, the smoke of her torment ascending up forever, man, right? It says, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. The thermonuclear missiles. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains, so shall they leap. Like the noise of a flame it's like a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Because they will be in a formation. When all of these missiles begin to be shot into the ends of this the world, or of this side of the globe, right? Guess what? They're all going to be shot from Russia, from China, all the different nations and countries that own these missiles. They're all going to press the button. Once one nation does it, Yahweh Shem Yahshua is going to put the spirit on those leaders to have that evil thought, as the scripture tells us. They're all going to press it, and all the nukes are going to be sent over here. It says, before their face, the people shall be much pained. All faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall. They shall climb the wall like men of war. And they shall march every one on his ways. And they shall not break their ranks. So there's no miscalculation. The nukes ain't about to hit each other in the air. One not going to explode mid-air, and then the rest just explode. No, No nuclear defense system is going to take out one, which is ultimately going to cause the reaction of the others to go off. No. The scriptures clearly tell us that they're going to hit their designated marks. Verse 8, neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk everyone in his path, because every nuke has a global positioning system set to it, a longitude and latitude in which it must hit. And the Lord is 100% accurate. It says, they shall walk everyone in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. They shall run to and fro in the city, and they shall run upon the wall. They shall climb up upon the houses. They shall enter in at the windows like a thief. The earth shall quake before them. The scripture speaks about the earth moving to and fro like a drunkard. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen due to the magnitude of this blast, of the power of these nukes smashing against this place. And also, America is going to let them off too. But this place is going to be utterly made desolate, as the scripture tells us. It says, the earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining, due to the smoke of this place being sent up. It says, what's happening regionally? Russia and U.S., they still hold the lion's share of nuclear weapons, but with deteriorating relations and fading treaty constraints, the possibility of unconstrained competition is rising. It speaks about China rapidly increasing stockpile. India and Pakistan are expanding arsenals and missile capabilities. North Korea is developing its program or increasing it. It says, why does this matter for you? Deterrence is more, let's get into the crisis is higher. There we go. In a limited conventional war, nuclear escalation may become less controllable. And ultimately, with Yahweh Shem Shai being the center, causing his spirit to dwell and causing that chaos to ensue, that fire being kindled more and more, it's inevitable. The scriptures speak about it. So it has to come to pass, man. And the only way to escape these thermonuclear destruction is ultimately being caught up by Yahweh Shai and the angels, man. Being caught up in the chariot, in that fathership, right? How do we know? Well, when we go into the book, and that's the point of the prophets, man. For every question, there's an answer that's directed back into the scriptures. There's Isaiah 26:20, and it reads, it says, come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, right? Those chambers is that secret place, also known as the chariots of Yahweh Shem Shai. Much like Noah, our forefather Noah, entered into that secret place, or those chambers, or that chamber, quote unquote, of being the ark, right? That door closing and him being safe from that destruction, the first death. Yahweh Shem Shai is going to do the same thing with his elect by sheltering them from the second death, and then being caught up into the chariot until the indignation be overpassed, as the scripture says, right? It says, come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation, right, the Lord's righteous anger, be overpassed, right? And his righteous anger is going to be that thermonuclear, or it's like those thermonuclear missiles hitting this place, right? That's why the scripture speaks about the elect, shall not taste of death, but they shall be changed in a twinkling of an eye by being caught up, right? Well, this is speaking of that same event. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth shall also disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. So this has to happen, and it's inevitable. And that's the only way to not taste of that second death, is ultimately Yahweh Shai saving you. Now, I want to get into, that framework of START. It says START stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. It's a series of nuclear arms control agreements between the U.S. and Russia, formerly the Soviet Union, designed to limit and reduce the number of strategic nuclear weapons each side possesses. Right? Its main goal is to reduce and limit long-range strategic nuclear weapons, the kind capable of striking across continents, ICBMs, SLBMs, and heavy bombers. Both countries agreed to inspect, verify, and limit how many nuclear warheads and delivery systems they deploy. Right? It started in START 1, right? Signed in 1991, enforced 1994 between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Said limited both sides to 6,000 nuclear warheads and 1,600 delivery vehicles. Expired in 2009. START 2 was signed in 1993, banning multiple warheads, MIRVs on land-based missiles, but it never entered into force because of disagreements after the U.S. withdrew from the anti-ballistic missiles treaty in 2002 or 2002. And it's always the U.S. that's leaving first because Esau is prideful about his weaponry. America is the greatest nation in terms of military strength, prowess, and capability upon the earth. But that means absolutely nothing until Yahweh Shemel Shai, when he has the power to destroy it, as the scripture says, in 1 hour. Right? Coming from the book of Revelation 18, and this is 17. For 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster and all company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? So it don't matter about, what these nations have in their mind to do. Ultimately, it's written that this place has to go down in fire. Right? Now, it said the New START was signed in 2010, entered into force in 2011. Currently, the only remaining nuclear arms control treaty between U.S. and Russia, which I find very interesting because we understand that Yahweh Shemel Shai has been increasing the woes, the birth pains. And for it to expire February 5th is beautiful because it's right around the corner. So it's tying into the days of the end, man. Right? It says START acts as a stabilizer between the world's two largest nuclear powers, prevents uncontrolled armed buildups, and as the scripture says, when they shall say peace and safety, because this treaty is seen as a place of peace between these two nations, right? But this peace soon has to end, as the scripture tells us. So Lord will, I'll get more into this START. It's just a skinny on just the START itself. And I know soon through the spirit, brothers are going to be tapping into that, the START treaty as well, right? The closer and closer we get into it, certain news platforms are going to be bringing out this information. And it's going to be more chaos as we get closer and closer into the end, which we're praying and hoping for it to hasten even faster because we want to get up out of this place, man. This place is hell. As the people of the earth are mourning, and Yahweh Shemel Shai has us in a spirit of, of seriousness, of course, being solemn. But we're happy, man. We're glad. We're joyous because we understand our captivity is nigh. The end of this age is almost over, and the Lord is gonna free us, as the scripture speaks about the captivity of Zion, our affliction being almost fulfilled. Through war it has to occur. So that's the point, not to make the lesson too lengthy, but this is what it was. So Lord willing, this lesson was edifying unto the body. I give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Harakah HaKodash, and double honors unto the apostles and elders of GMS Great Millstone, and a sincere shalom to Yakim, bringing out this word in diligence and in truth. Shalom.